Welcome to the second half of climate literacy. Now that you understand a bit more about the fundamentals of climate science, we can take a really critical and creative eye to the issue of both the impacts of climate change as well as the potential response options that we have available to us. In this second half of the course, we're moving on to the human dimensions of climate change. This means understanding the impacts of sea level rise, of drought, of extreme events on human settlements around the world. We also explore ways we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions by working with our energy system, and finally, how we can adapt to the impacts of climate change. This last bit is particularly important because we know these impacts are already occurring and are likely to accelerate in the future. This isn't about having the answers to all possible questions, but rather asking better questions. The terrain of adaptation and mitigation is changing constantly as we learn more about the costs and benefits associated with our different pathways of development. We really just need to look around the world for examples that can give us clues to where we might want to go. I'm actually standing in one of those examples right now. This is Southeast False Creek in Vancouver, or Athletes Village for the 2010 Olympics. There's more features related to sustainability in this neighborhood than I can mention, really. There's sewage heat recovery, providing energy to the buildings surrounding me. We have green roofs here, very efficient buildings. We have rainwater capture systems, and it's a compact, complete community. That means that people can work, live, and play all within a very small area. One of the major themes in this second half of the course is action. What are innovative individuals, companies, and governments doing around the world to respond to climate change? In fact, many people would argue that we already have the technologies we need available to us. The question is really accelerating their uptake and spreading them around the world, using them more effectively. First, we'll spend time understanding both the biophysical and the human impacts of climate change. This means not just understanding things like sea level rise and drought, but rather where and how we build our cities so that they are more or less vulnerable to those impacts. We move on from this discussion of the impacts of climate change to a focus on solutions, especially the mitigation of climate change. It's tempting here to focus just on technologies. This is the typical tone of this conversation, focused on solar panels and wind turbines, but there's more to it than this. In this part of the course, we're also exploring the behavioral drivers, the cultural underpinnings of climate change mitigation. Following our discussion of mitigation, we delve into adaptation. What does it mean to be a vulnerable community? There's a lot of ethical questions bound up here. Who's responsible for paying for adaptation in developing countries, for instance, and which communities are most vulnerable? How can development play into building the resilience of communities so that it's more adaptable in the face of climate change impacts? To wrap up the course, we explore climate change policy, both adaptation policy and mitigation policy, from the global to the local. We delve into the issues of the Kyoto Protocol and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We look at national adaptation plans of action, all the way down to local, provincial, state strategies like carbon taxes and green building codes. By the time you finish this course, you'll have been introduced both to the fundamentals of the climate science as well as the very complex human dimensions of the problem. One of the greatest resources associated with this course is you, the thousands and thousands of people taking this class. If you work in this field, if you have expertise in sustainability or climate change, I really do encourage you to share what you know with your classmates so that you can actually teach each other. The scale of this challenge is pretty dramatic, but there are really great innovations and solutions available to us already if you know where to look. So let's get started.